Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to Real Time for the real everyday movie fan. I am, of course, your host, Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy. I'm Ryan Murphy.
I'm James Sheridan.
Good timing there, guys. Good timing. We try and act professional as best we can here. Oh, there he is pulling up. I got mine right here.
Always.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us here today, folks. And it's been a little while since we've done this, guys. Today we're giving you a real-time roundtable discussion. And we were kind of thinking about what we wanted to discuss next, because we've been having trouble just finding a good thing to discuss. And I can't remember who it was. Was it?
Well, what happened is I talked about something that I wanted to buy.
That's right. You wanted to buy. Yeah. That's right. Ryan wants to buy a motorcycle because everyone knows he's
a love of fuck.
Yeah, you're throwing it. You're
throwing him under the bus.
In the lead there, bud.
Hey, it's okay. But we're here to talk about what we believe is the top three, each giving us your top three most iconic movie or TV show vehicles. Now we're saying vehicles because some of these aren't going to be cars. Some of these might be flying objects. Some of these might be
you didn't just show
motorcycles.
Broomstick.
I think we all know what James and Josh and I all know what each other's number one is. I mean, we've already.
I think so.
Even if we hadn't shared it, we would already know what at least Josh and James.
I think pretty much everyone knows what my favorite, my number one is.
No,
I
have no clue what yours is, James.
No one knows.
Not a clue at all. I mean, nobody pay attention to the back of his background. I mean, it's great background, by the way. But we want to give you guys our top three, our favorite, and what we believe is the most iconic. That we want to preface that this is what we believe is our individual top three favorites, and what we believe is the most iconic and influential in today's pop culture. Now, let's start off with Ryan there with his Miller Lite.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is your number three TV or movie vehicle?
Well, I feel like we're going to overlap a lot here because number three is kind
too.
of general, and it's what everyone in their right mind would have on any list, and that's the Batmobile. Now, one of the things we talked about when we were doing this is not only what vehicles are cool, but also the accessibility. So I don't think anyone is going to be mentioning X-Wing fighters. Or
now hold on, we didn't state accessibility. I'm saying what's most iconic and what is most influential.
Well,
I was going to say because what I think is on Josh's list, is technically not accessible.
It's
not
even
fucking exist.
real.
There's versions of it that I've been in one of what's Josh's number one. But
we'll get there.
No, so the Batmobile is really interesting because there's different versions of it, and I've seen people own versions of the Batmobile. Like people build them. If you build it, they will drive. So obviously there's the classic. The first one you think of as the classic, if you're going in order, is the 1966 Adam West Batmobile, which is awesome in its own right. Then you have probably what is the absolute, when you think of Batman and the Batmobile, I think the number one, what they should just bring the fuck back in the movies, because there's no point in having another one, is the Burton Mobile.
You haven't seen the set photos, have you?
I haven't seen what?
Oh, the set photos.
I'm not going to say anything, but your wish is my command, sir.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Which I'm so excited about.
Yeah, so
more than the rest of the movie, in fact.
So
you're talking about Flash. Sorry.
Yeah, he's talking about the Flash. It's coming back in the Flash, I guess. So if it's really like no changes, just the Burton Mobile. Because if so, that's because there's no need to fucking update something. Like just give the fans what they want.
Well, I will say this.
It does raise some questions.
I'll say this right now. If Flash comes out and it's the original Batmobile, no changes, no nothing, I feel like Ryan's gonna scream like a schoolgirl, like he did when he heard the Batman theme song.
I scream. Yeah, you know I scream. Yeah.
I will say that it does appear to be. It breaks canon a little bit with the Tim Burton films because the version that I saw on set, I don't know if it's going to be the version, but was technically destroyed. But
yeah, well, you can rebuild a new one.
I guess. Yeah.
Then there's the two Schumacher mobiles. The first one was actually pretty cool.
The first one was okay.
The first one was
too much neon.
The second one from Batman and Robin, I think is the best thing to come out of Batman and Robin. It's really cool. I've always loved the Batman and Robin mobile.
I hated that one.
No, come on, it's awesome. It's got one seater, and it's just a dragster, just a cool. It's awesome. Fuck you. You can also.
It's awesome. Fuck you.
You can also get. You can probably also build the Tumbler from the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yep. I love that one.
And
that one might be my favorite.
The Batpod as well. Probably not the Batwing or the Bat or maybe the Batboat from Batman Forever. You could probably
when I think of the Nolan franchise, to me, what the most iconic vehicle of that franchise, I honestly think of the Batmobile, the motorcycle. That's to me like the coolest thing.
The motorcycle was the Tumbler. It was part of the Tumbler that broke off.
I know it is, but for me, I don't know. The Tumbler I loved it. Don't get me wrong, but in the realm of Batman, I felt like it was too. Like I get where they were going with it, trying to go real world tactical, and I'm not dissing it. But when I think of something that was just like cool and iconic, that the Batpod was just so sick.
Now let me make sure this is known. You can probably have someone build a Tumbler for you for a couple $1 million.
That and a Batpod.
You cannot have the Batpod eject from it. That is science fiction.
Right? You can't have a Batpod made.
In the movie. They never built that to actually happen.
So. You'd be surprised what the fan community can do. There, one of the famous examples of that I keep hearing about is the exosuit from Aliens. They could never get it to do certain things, so they had the hero model that Sigourney Weaver stood in, but they had, which is often common for both vehicles and props, they had sort of like specialized versions where it was just like the arm and the caliper that would close and this or that, and they couldn't get it to do all things on film, so they would cut to a component and do that. A fan actually built a unit that was fully functional, worked just like the movie, had all the parts that worked just like the movie, and ended up getting hired by James Cameron to be one of his prop guys.
Wow.
So these things are possible. I've seen some people do some like really wacky things with their hero prop
and their money props. And their time.
Right.
But
that's the big part, is the money.
If we're talking accessibility, I think the new Batman movie from Matt Reeves will probably be the most accessible Batmobile ever, because it's basically like a Ford with some.
It's kind of going back to the Adam West, just a car Batmobile type thing.
Yeah.
And I will say I may be in the minority, but one of my favorites, because it had a great blend of tactical, but going back to the traditional Burton Batmobile I'm talking about Ben Affleck's Batmobile. I think that one was actually pretty awesome. I liked it because it had the mixture of tactical from the Nolan franchise, but the fan what's the word? Fan help me out here, guys. The fan service. There we go. Thank you.
Fan service, yeah.
Fan service of going back to the Burtons.
Yeah, well, it looked like an updated version of the Burtonmobile. So
yeah, and that's why I liked it so much.
Yeah. So
see, I'm such a fan. I love the Tumbler so much that in film school I actually cut a trailer for the Tumbler from that. Like it looked like an actual like car trailer thing, and had like the classic car music, commercial music on it and everything. And
that's cool.
Actually,
love that car.
And that it has the Tumbler has a pretty cool introduction in the film itself. What's that? Oh, the Tumbler? Oh, you wouldn't be interested in that. But to be fair, the original Batmobile actually has a pretty cool intro too. Get in the car. Which one? Da-da-da-da!
That is pretty great.
Yeah.
All right, so James, let's move on to you next, and then we'll go to me. What do you consider your number three most iconic?
Well, see, I failed the project already, guys, because I misunderstood the concept of this, so I only came up with two. So I've had to like come up with a third one on the fly.
That's all right.
Mine's already been
20 minutes. Come on.
Ixnayed. Mine's already been ixnayed by Ryan because it's not an achievable one. And I went back and forth about there's two vehicles from this franchise that to me are iconic. One is a little more iconic than the other, and probably would have gone with that one, except that this one means a little bit more to me, and it's the Incom T-65B X-Wing from Star Wars.
I love the fact that you actually, it's not just the X-Wing, like everyone knows the X-Wing, but there's different kinds of X-Wings, and I have to specify this is the.
Do you want to know how much research I have fucking done for this episode? I've gone all out.
Preparation, my man.
Short,
preparation.
Yes. So the T-65 Incom X-Wing is a snub-nosed fighter, fast maneuverable fighter. It's built to be, within canon, it's supposed to be sort of the predecessor of the Z-95 Headhunter and ARC 170 Starfighters, which were the clone fighters that you saw in Clone Wars, which had sort of the X-Wing S-foil patterns on them. But they had a lot of problems. They weren't, perfect. And towards the end of the Clone Wars and into the beginning of the Empire was looking for new fighters. They wanted a classic new fighter to fill out their fleet, which was expanding and taking over territory. And they went to Incom and said, "We want you to build us a fighter." So they took that concept, developed it, and built a even better fighter. And the Empire kind of ixnayed it and went with the TIE fighter instead. So what happened was, according to the lore that I was researching in like the 10 minutes I had before this episode, so I may be missing some details. Please don't shoot me if I'm getting this wrong, but this is just what I read off of Wikipedia.
Yes, I'll bet you have.
It basically, the plans fell into the Alliance's hands by accident. And the Alliance, of course, built this weapon, this ship, which unfortunately isn't as fast as the TIE fighters, which tends to be their most common sort of adversary, but they're more sturdy. And unlike a lot of other fighters up until that point, there were a few, but they had a double sort of mechanism that made them really sort of important and powerful. One was that they were capable of faster than light drive, hyperspace drive, which made them very integral into strategy for the way the rebellion fought their wars, because you could pop an X-Wing or a fleet of X-Wings into a star system, hit a target like a base or a space station or something, and pop right back out again, as opposed to the TIE fighters, which are dependent on a sort of mothership. So they would require a star destroyer to come in, which would set off all these alarms and the sort of like planetary defense systems and whatnot. Whereas a fleet of single fighters, which they say in A New Hope is exactly the strategy. No one's going to pay attention to single man fighters. So these things just fly in, they hit their target, they fly out. The other really important aspect is that they used astromechs, which, if you know anything about Star Wars lore, astromechs, little droids, R2D2. Just saying, some people might. Astromechs are really important aspects of especially that era of Star Wars, because not only were they mechanics for the exterior of ships and the internal components of ships, in these T-65B X-Wing starfighter, they were also the sort of navigation system, because they had a computer built within them, and they could make proper calculations for how to jump through hyperspace, which, if you know your Star Wars lore, is really important, because bounce right off a supernova and there ends your journey, farm boy.
The line is, we could bounce right into a supernova and that would end your never mind, that would end up something real fast, wouldn't it?
So you lost it.
Basically, like they aren't as fast as the TIE fighters, but they're a little more sturdy, slightly less maneuverable, but because they could take more hits. They also had a small sort of
shields,
onboard shield fighter. Yeah, that's one of the important aspects, is that they had shields. But the astromech and the hyperspace capabilities are really what made them very important. And like, they sort of became famous for the ship that destroyed the Death Star. And of course, we know that they went on to become the primary sort of fighter of the Alliance, famously flown by Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles and Biggs Darklighter, and you could name like 1,000 different star pilots. Famously, the primary ship of Rogue Squadron, which I cannot wait for that.
I can't wait for that show.
We talked about it when the Disney thing came up about all the movies that they're coming out with. The starfighters were one of the reasons I fell in love with Star Wars, was watching the dogfights, because they were so well done, and I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. And then I realized that I'm just too big of a person to fit into a plane, the way they're built. So and obviously we're not going to go to space and fight in space, but that's a different matter. So X-Wing has a very important place in my heart. The other ship that they could have done was the Millennium Falcon, which is probably more iconic. Yeah. And you see that ship and exactly where it's from and what it's doing. But just because of the personal meaning to me, I chose the T-65 X-Wing, because it's just a cool ship, man.
I will say it's more accessible. You can't get either one to actually work and fly for you. But if you were to spend $1 million or $2 million, you could probably get an X-Wing built. It's just sit in your front yard and sit in, and maybe even have a R2 unit in the back going. But you can't. The Millennium Falcon would cost you a lot more, like $100 million to build a.
I mean, I've seen people build them out of plywood before, and just building just wooden components and then painting it. So it's not hard to build these things, but like we're not going to get one that's going to fly. The accessibility thing I didn't think was an actual aspect of this, because unfortunately
me neither,
my
not
second
at all.
one is going to be disqualified for that as well, because actually both of my vehicles, my other two vehicles are going to be somewhat disqualified because there's components of them that just don't exist.
Okay.
Like they can't exist. So
now
but
going
anyways,
on,
that's my number 3. Love that ship. Absolutely
great number
fantastic,
3.
iconic.
That's a really great number 3. And I think my number 2 might overlap there a little bit. And so we'll see. But for my number 3, and this was tough to go from number 2 or number 3 for me. But for now, my number 3, well, it
Is
can
it hard
be a
to go
little
number
accessible.
2 for you?
Huh?
Jesus. Why?
Ryan, we love you. That's all we can say, buddy.
Beer.
Oh boy. But for my number 2, for hardcore nerds of this franchise, you'll know what I'm referring to. But I am my number 3 is the Party Wagon, or if some people don't know, it is the TMNT van that is featured in the cartoon, but also in the Michael Bay. Yep, there it is. There it is.
This was one of my runner-ups.
I love that he had
debated
it
between doing the X-Wing or this one.
Yeah,
right there.
But that'll be my number 3, only because I feel like if you in pop culture, especially for the TMET world, it's like you instantly see it and you know what it is. And I did love one of the things I did appreciate about the Bay franchise is that they've introduced the van. Now I was able to do some really cool and crazy things, I think more so than the cartoons did. But for someone who grew up with the cartoons, like it's one of those
things with that thing.
I remember as a kid, that was one of the things I played with the most, as far as like my action figures and like the vehicle having different. I remember one time I had Spider-Man in there with the Ninja Turtles, like, driving around in the van on my floor. But it was also just just the look of it when you have, like, especially in the original cartoons where you have like the sewer plate in the front, and and I remember in the Bay movies they kind of try to emulate the cartoon one as best they could. And just the color of it was very psychedelic and neat, like very much vibrant colors. And I don't know, just something I really, anytime I think in pop culture, I think it's something that you see it, you automatically know what it is. Like, even if you don't know Ninja Turtles, the Ninja Turtle van, you see it and you go, that has to be Ninja Turtles. It just has to be.
Yeah,
just based on how it looks and how it's painted.
They reissued the actual vehicle, the toy vehicle, as a Walmart exclusive earlier this year. So
I gotta buy that.
If you're a collector and you want to go find them, they're very hard to find right now. Like, people are lining up and calling Walmart left, right, and center, but they're out there. So like, I really want to get my hands on one, because unfortunately the one I had as a kid is gone. But that one is a very cool one. This is actually one sort of similar to the Batmobile, where it's like there's that version that's iconic, but they've had so many different iterations through all of them.
Yep.
Like the 2003 series had the Brinks truck version. And then later, there was a different one. I don't remember what it was made out of. The 2012 series had the subway car version.
Yeah.
And then later, I think they had a pizza truck. No, sorry, the pizza truck was 2003. This one had a different one. They've had all kinds of. There was the garbage truck in the films. Obviously, like the original, sort of based on a VW bus, but
it
like,
is.
by the time
It's based
Donatello
on the.
got his
It's based on a 1964 Dodge VW not VW, sorry, it's actually based on a 1964 Dodge A100 van. That's what it's based on. It's not a VW.
But by the time Donatello got his hands on it, it barely resembles that anymore.
Right.
That's the other thing, is that the other thing about your choice, Josh, is that it's, with the exception of the Bay films, it's animated, so there's not actually a physical thing.
There was a VW bus in the original film.
In the original films, there was, but it wasn't. Yeah, it was in the original film, but it wasn't like the turtle van.
It wasn't the party.
It wasn't the party wagon.
It was clearly in there for the purpose of like throwing reference to, like, that was actually from the comics, was that they didn't have a party wagon. That was a cartoon creation, but they did have a van that they drove around, and that was a VW bus. Yeah, which is what the movies were referencing.
Yeah, and that was like them or hate them. I more hate them, but I do. No, I'm talking about the Bay movies. Like, I did appreciate that they brought the party wagon there. Like, it was
the second
so
one
cool.
is at least a little bit fun.
The second one was like, we should probably try and placate some of the fans. Let's bring in some of these classic aspects. Bebop,
exactly.
Betty and the party bus and all that sort of stuff.
Or delight.
It didn't make the movie good.
Right. And even though, like, some of the cool things that the history of the party wagon could do, like, I've always loved when they shoot, like, out of the front, they'll shoot like sewer plates out of the front, or they'll like do some kind of like they'll have the ceiling come open and like do a bunch of different things. And
The
a
one
lot
that
of cool things there.
transforms into Splinter. You get there's the Transformer ones where they all transform into different vehicles, and Splinter transforms into the party bus. I have it somewhere. Like, yeah,
I was gonna say I don't remember that vehicle.
My nephews play with it
because I know there's there's an official Transformer version of the DeLorean and an official Transformer version of the Ecto-1, but I don't think the Party Wagon ever got one.
Oh, it did. It turns into Splinter. I'm telling you, I have the physical proof somewhere.
Well, how about this, Ryan? As you know, a little peek behind the curtain. Ryan's gonna be editing this, so Ryan, if you have to find it online, just throw it right here, and we'll see it afterwards.
Find it in my yeah. All
right, Ryan. Let's go on to your number 2.
Well, it's interesting. We can talk for 10 or more minutes about a lot of these, but this is one that there's going to be no discussion about at all. As Josh and James and most of the people in my life know, I love, contrary to popular belief among James and Josh, I love movies. I love
he does. He does love movies. I can attest to this, guys.
I love TV shows. I love stories, books, but I have one that's my favorite that stands out among them all, even greater than some of the movies I talk about, and that is a somewhat little known television show that ran from 1999 to 2002 on the WB and UPN.
Dawson's Creek.
Yeah, Dawson's Creek, exactly. called Roswell. Now, some of the kiddos that might not be watching this would probably know the show that's currently airing on the CW called Roswell, New Mexico, which is a remake series of this. I have not seen it. I'm not really just not that interested. But it just got renewed for its 4th season, which means it's going to be on for longer than the original show was. The original show aired for 2 seasons from 1999 to 2001 on the WB. And it and Buffy both got canceled by the WB that year. And so the UPN bought them both and aired them. And Buffy went on for 2 seasons at UPN. Roswell only lasted 1 more, and it was a horrible season. But the first 2 seasons are absolutely amazing. Show is about a bunch of kids who are like Clark Kent in Smallville. They know they're aliens. They know they landed here when they were children, but they don't know where they're come from. Their past is a mystery to them. And they are trying to figure that out while they fall in love with humans and have adventures trying to evade the FBI and such. And one of the human characters who it gets mixed up in these adventures is this total spaz squirrel, not squirrel, scatterbrained. She yells squirrel, like, scatterbrained girl named Maria. And she is totally, like I said, she's totally a spaz. She's totally like, does not want anything at first to do with the aliens or their business, but she gets forced to sort of taxi them around a lot in her 19 something or other, we'll say 1999. I'm trying to figure it out as we speak. I posted on the Roswell fan base on Facebook about what year the car was, but it's a Jetta. It's a Volkswagen Jetta. It's a red Jetta. And it became, I call it the Roswell Mobile. And over 3 seasons, that car goes through so much abuse. And the running joke is that she has to keep getting the car fixed, and her mother doesn't know that an Uzi took out the rear window from the FBI or various things like that. And she keeps, shuttling these aliens around. But it's the Roswell Mobile. And part of the reason this is number 1, because unlike you guys, my number 1 and my number 2 are cars that are not only accessible, but ones that I fully intend on owning someday. In my future, I will own a 1990 whatever red Jetta, and someone will go, "Why do you have that shitty car in the back?" Oh, let me tell you, that's the Roswell Mobile.
Let me go through story time here.
There's also a Jeep. Max, the main character, has a Jeep that he also drives around, but for some reason I just don't care about the Jeep. The Jetta just seems so much more the Roswell Mobile and so much more romantic, and it's I recommend that you guys watch this show. You should watch this show. It's on Hulu, so check it out.
You've been trying to get me to watch that show as long as we've known each other, and I will eventually check it out. I swear.
I did watch it when it originally aired, and it just, unlike Smallville, I just couldn't get into it, and it didn't have the same sort of cash with like my peer groups that like Dawson's Creek had. So like I watched that because everyone else watched it, but it's like Roswell was a little more interesting than that, but it just, I don't know, it never stuck with me the way Smallville did. But my buddy actually had a Jetta in high school, and we used to tool around in that a lot. That and my other buddy, like there was 3 of us. We would go to comic book shops and movies and all this stuff, and like this was our adventure. And like one had a Jetta, the other one had a Honda Civic, and like they were these old like 80s beaters, which weren't that old, in 99 when I was a teenager. so freaking long ago. But like, I relate to that car too, because like it's a part of my history, and like those old beater cars were just how our generation grew up. Was, you know, you didn't get the fancy new car, you got the junker that someone else didn't want anymore, that you might get lucky and your uncle could fix up for you, or you might be a bit of a gearhead and could fix up yourself. But
my first car was $450 and it was a POS, but I loved that car.
$450?
Yeah.
$450.
Yep.
And it worked.
I paid for it myself. It ran just fine. It was I think it was like a 1987 Buick. A lot of high miles, but it worked it ran like a charm. But then
and you drove that thing to North High School and back?
It did, until I let a friend of mine borrow it, who's not my friend anymore, but let him borrow it. And he ended up, he's like, I'm just going to go down the street real quick, see my girlfriend. Next thing I get a phone call, he's a mile down the road and he T-boned a car. So that was the end of that car.
And that was only worth $400 instead of $400.
Hey, you know, I had, my mom took my license away and I had to wait 6 months and save up for a new, that's when I got my truck, which is, any friends who know me, it was it's like blue / purple tinted, but everyone just called it the purple truck. So
I love that. As long as we're on the subject of our first car, so I'll go ahead and share my first car. My parents bought I'm the third child, and my parents bought both my older sisters their first car. And when it came to get my first car, my dad just bought my sister's car from her for $1,000. So
that's not uncommon.
It's a privilege to have parents who are wealthy enough to buy all their kids' cars. But comparatively speaking, I got the shaft. Not only was it $1,000, but it was also a girl's car. So my dad actually took my car to work one day, and he said, as he was leaving work, one of his coworkers said, "Tom, you driving that thing? That's a woman's car." It was a Pontiac. No, it was a Pontiac Sunfire. So
okay.
Yeah, those were a dime a dozen, and like that, I wouldn't call that a girl's car. That was, everyone had a Sunfire at that point. Like you could throw a rock and hit a Sunfire that time period.
A lot of people had Sunfires in my school.
Yeah, I never actually got a first car, so
yeah.
Let's
go and move forward here.
No, I don't drive.
You don't? Oh, that's right. You don't.
I don't drive. I'm public transit only. So like I've had a license. It expired like 20 years ago, and like I've never owned a vehicle.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Okay. Sharing time.
I've had a vehicle ever since I was 15 years old. As when I bought that $450 car, but I had to pass the driver's ed before I can actually officially drive it. But anyway, let's move forward here. James
is number 2.
What's your number 2?
I think I know what this is going to be.
I don't know, honestly. I think I do, but I'm not sure. I knew it.
Yep, there it is.
I know it.
There it is.
The 1981 DMC-12 DeLorean
right.
motor car. DeLorean was a company out of Belfast, Ireland, started by John DeLorean.
Northern Ireland, you heretic. Belfast, Northern Ireland.
It's whatever. My grandfather was born there. I don't give a shit. Anyway, I'm trying to tell the story here about the car. So this car is actually kind of funny because it has a reputation for being this terrible car that if it wasn't for the movie Back to the Future, probably wouldn't be memorable at all, because it was such a it was built to be a sort of contemporary to that era's type of Ferraris and the fast sort of supercars and whatnot, but it was sort of not budget made, but it was it's built to look luxurious, but it didn't operate very well. In fact,
very
one of the
lightweight,
common misconceptions about it actually was really heavy, which plays into a problem with it.
The chassis and mechanics are heavy, but I'm talking about the frame, the actual doorways were very lightweight.
No, according to my research, the doors especially made it very heavy, and that's a problem because the lore of Back to the Future requires that the car go up to 88 miles per hour to reach time travel. Notoriously, the car didn't reach 80 miles an hour. It was not fast enough to go that speed. Now, that's not actually true. The problem was that the motor that they put into it, they were trying to make it accessible. What was the motor they put into it? They put into it a Peugeot, Renault, Volvo 130 horsepower V6, which would it didn't quite get the speed they wanted to. And because the car was so heavy for the type of car they were trying to make, it didn't go as fast as they needed it to. So famously, within the lore, Doc actually switched out the motor for a Porsche 298 V8 engine, which got him up to the necessary 95 plus 90 mile per hour speed limit. What else can I tell you about this car? Stainless steel exterior, which, is said to be important for flux dispersal, which is bullshit. They just wanted a car that looked good. Originally, the actual time machine was supposed to be a refrigerator. And the test subject of it was a chimpanzee named Shemp. And they realized that, first of all, lugging that thing around is going to be a pain in the ass, especially in 1955. They're going to have to put it on the back of a truck, which is going to stick out terribly. So they decided to change it to a car. And famously, Universal wanted them to change it to a Mustang because they thought that would be a cooler car, and they could get a tie-in from Ford because tie-ins were all the rage. If you've seen Back to the Future, you can see all of the product placement in that film. Pepsi everywhere, Nike everywhere, just all over the place, all kinds of product placement, and Ford wanted in on that. Unfortunately, the Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis kind of put their foot down and said, no, we're going to make it a DeLorean, because at the time, John DeLorean, the guy who created the DeLorean Motor Company, was going through a huge trial because he'd been kind of like grifted in this like FBI drug bust thing.
Oh God!
Where he wasn't he walked through like an airport with like an excessive amount of cocaine, like they made a movie several suitcases full of cocaine. And like he was supposed to be like doing it for them, and he thought he was doing it for them, and it was like an entrapment thing. And I don't remember all the details, but anyways, the motor car was very much in the news at that point because it wasn't selling as well as they wanted to, and the company was going under. The boss was going to prison now, and they thought that was kind of a funny wrinkle, and the car was cool enough that like this could sell a movie kind of thing. And I mean, just look at that car, like the lines on this thing are freaking majestic. And
oh yeah, and I think what helps is that
that's not, there we go.
I love when you look at the car by itself that doesn't have all the time machine stuff on it. To me, it doesn't look all that great, but when you add the stuff that they did for Back to the Future, that's when he's like, man, that looks.
See, I think it's a gorgeous car by itself because it has some nice lines. It's very sleek. The gullwing doors are just so iconic.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's what I'm trying to say is that without the movie, like this car would be nothing. Like it's contemporary with a Bricklin. Do you guys even know what the Bricklin was?
Nope.
It was an Irish Canadian car that looked very similar to that. Had a few more sort of doodads on it, but like nobody remembers it because it only sold a few years and went belly up. So did DeLorean. The only reason anyone remembers it is because of Back to the Future, and because it became this time machine and became part of this like beloved franchise.
Yeah.
And like essential, not just a part of the franchise, like it's a central character. It's a plot point.
Oh yeah.
Within these films, as opposed to a lot of other vehicles that we talk about. Like this is integral to the story, more so than like even like the ships in Star Wars. This is like almost a character unto itself, and just it's so iconic. It's so memorable. It's so pretty.
And I think what helps this car and this vehicle is that it's the trilogy's been over for a very long time, but it still stood the test of time along with the trilogy. That even today you see it, and even like our parents introduced us to it. Now we're introducing it to like our kids who have kids. But to me, it's one of those franchises, and it's one of those cars that it really has stood the test of time. And I think that's what you're kind of alluding to there, and that's what these lists are for. That's when you think of these vehicles, you automatically know what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It didn't stand the test of time. This beer.
One of the funny things about the legacy of the DeLorean Motor Company is that once it went under, a company, sort of conglomerate company, just bought up all the parts. Because that's what companies did in the 80s was they would buy up other companies and then sell the companies as stock. Like it was just something to buy and sell, accrue value and sell. And this company in Houston bought all the parts, and they have reopened a facility in Houston, Texas, where you can buy an 81 DeLorean from stock parts made in 1981. Now they don't have the complete cars because there's like, I think they said something about like 97% stock, and there's like little things that they have to either buy used and bring in, or they have to fabricate because they just don't exist anymore, or they've aged too poorly kind of thing. But you can basically buy a quote unquote brand new DeLorean because these are factory parts. They've never left the factory floor kind of thing. Right. I mean, they have because they had to be shipped around, but like they haven't been put into a car and then driven off of a lot, which, as we know, that depreciates the value of the vehicle. these things are basically brand new, and there's been rumors forever about, you know, them coming out with a new DeLorean. So I don't know, for my money, this might be the most iconic movie car in history. Has one of the best introductions in movie history. Just that the back of that truck opening up,
truck opens up,
pouring out, and it's just like that burns your memory, and like seeing it like time travel for the first time, and the fire streaks.
Also, the
like spinning, and
the commercial for the movie, the trailer for the movie that wasn't actually part of the movie.
That trailer.
Where they go into the DeLorean and Michael J. Fox is in there, and
you're seeing he kicks the tires and you see all the parts. They're like panning all over the parts, and it's like, if you get a chance, go to YouTube. It's probably like my top 3 teasers of all time.
There's our next show. There's our next show, people.
Yep.
Now, speaking of people who own a DeLorean, Ernest Cline, author of pretty much I think all 3 of our favorite book, Ready Player One.
It's my favorite, but it's one I like.
Yeah. It's you at one point several years ago told me it was your favorite book, so that may have changed. That's fine. It's my favorite book. I don't know about Josh, but it's up there.
One of.
And but in the book, Ready Player One, of course, it takes place in a virtual reality in which people can actually have X-wings and all sorts of stuff, and they can have whatever they can afford. Wade, the main character, gets a virtual reality DeLorean that's equipped with parts of the Buckaroo Banzai's car, which I don't know anything about because I've never seen, the Ghostbusters Ecto-1, and Knight Rider's KITT. And then in real life, Ernest Cline gave himself that car. So it is a DeLorean, but it has like the parts on the front that KITT has from Knight Rider. I've never seen Knight Rider, but it has like front lights. Yeah. And then it has something from Buckaroo Banzai, and then it has like something from the Ghostbusters mobile, and then it has
a proton pack because it's a rear engine car. So in the front here, this is your cargo area, and it's unfortunately very shallow, because if you can see, like, there's not much clearance between the wheel and the hood there. So you pull that up, and there's like 6 inches of like storage space in there. So he's got like a proton pack, and I think he's got this thing, the hoverboard, which was one of my other runners up.
Yeah, that could.
So, love that one.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so I think he's got those 2 in there. I'm pretty sure he's got a flux capacitor, because it wouldn't be a DeLorean reference without a flux capacitor. And like you said, he's got the Buckaroo Banzai stuff, which again, I don't know what that is. But actually, Knight Rider's another one that I wish I knew more about, because that should be one that's on our list, because it's so iconic itself. But unfortunately, that was a little before even my time. So I don't actually know that much about it, besides it having like, it's got a pretty cool interior for the time period, and of course the light up and the talking voice of Mr. Feeney.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to my number 2, which I told you ours would interlap a little bit, so I think you have a feeling where I'm going with this. For my number 2, I'm giving it to the Star Wars' Millennium Falcon, which the proper model is the YT 1300F Light Freighter.
Fucking
get a little nerdy there. Let's get a little nerdy there. To me, this is what growing up as a kid, and whenever you see the Millennium Falcon, the instant thing that pops in your mind is adventure, like the feeling of adventure. Because I will say it wasn't as iconic as when you see the Millennium Falcon for the first time. It's not really an iconic like like the DeLorean, but the part where it really takes off is when it actually leaves Tatooine and they go on this chase trying to flee from when they flee from TIE fighters, and they're traveling to Alderaan and stuff like that. Like those moments to me, like it solidified, even throughout the trilogy, it solidified the feeling of adventure and a feeling of a quest, a feeling of just even then, like it wasn't as good as like the dogfights of X-Wing. No, of course not. But its maneuverability really had you feel that sense of excitement. And I was
just gonna say, like it marks an important point in effects history too, because the way they shot that ship was unlike anything they'd ever done before. Because usually you have ships on strings flying by the camera, whereas the camera was on a computerized rig moving past this thing. And the dynamic shots they got of that vehicle, and could only get of that vehicle because the snub fighters were too small to do the very dynamic shots that you could with that. And the giant starfighters were just supposed to be behemoths, so they were very slow moving. This thing was whipping all over the place and doing barrel rolls and flips, and like you watch it go through. Sorry, I'm stealing your spotlight right now, Josh.
No, you're fine. No, I mean this
Sorry,
is what
I've
we
got a
make
huge
these.
passion for this vehicle
No,
too.
no, me too. That's why we talk about these. And I feel like after the first movie came out, like, because even though it wasn't the first vehicle you saw in Star Wars, because like at first you see like Princess Leia's ship first being dragged onto a fighter, or sorry, not a fighter, but yeah. And so that's like the first vehicle you see, but this one is the one that really solidified what Star Wars is. Now you can argue with X-Wings and TIE fighters or the Death Star, but for me, like you see the Millennium, but even in like,
if there's a moment that really solidifies Star Wars, like it's the very opening sequence where you see the Star Destroyer be like, don't go forward and forward and forward. And
if there was a vehicle to top the Millennium Falcon as an iconic vehicle, it would be a Star Destroyer, but Millennium Falcon is just, I'm sorry, a cooler ship.
Yeah.
Like for me,
By
like
far.
even like for me, when I think about influence in pop culture, even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, not really, you see the Millennium Falcon, like, oh, that's the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars.
You'd be surprised.
For most people, you'll see like an X-Wing or even the Death Star, and they'll say, oh, that's from Star Wars. At least for me, from what I've gathered around. So that for me is the other one. And also just it, even after the first movie, it took on a character of its own, like you were talking about with the DeLorean, especially whether we hate him or like him. Once it really, really took on its own character in the new trilogy.
Well, the fuck it did. Where the fuck is that coming from?
So in Force Awakens, when it really shows up,
on a character.
when it shows up, it actually takes on a character of its own, because Rey and Finn don't know what it is, but as fans, you automatically know.
Sure.
And it plays an important role.
There's also like Solo, where we learn the backstory of why the Falcon is so belligerent as a ship, so difficult as a ship, and has such a personality. Like ships don't have personalities, but this one does. And we get some backstory that it's actually a droid who was very belligerent and, whatnot. And they plugged her memory core into the ship to give the Falcon its nav system, which is what makes the ship in the universe so famous, is that it could navigate just about anything. Like the famous brag from Han Solo is that, I could navigate the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, which doesn't mean anything because parsecs are a measurement of distance. But the retcon was that he was able to do it in the most efficient pathway because of the nav computer's ability to find the safe enough route to get through there, which the movie kind of even retcons a little bit itself, and that it was mostly luck and a little bit of skill. So
and another reason I think it's so unique and it's so iconic is, so most starships or most ships, the cockpit or the bridge, whatever you want to call it, it's usually in the center of a ship or a vehicle or anything like that. This one is on the side, which is, I thought, was very a unique take that George Lucas decided to do when creating this vehicle.
Well, first of all, I want to say that is probably maybe the only moment in the entire Force Awakens, the worst motion picture ever created, that actually had me fanning out a little bit, was the part where they're like, what are we doing? Let's go with that ship over there. And then I think it pans over. It's been 6 years since I've seen the movie and I won't watch it again, but I think they just pan over to the movie and it's like, ta-da!
I think the line was, they're running towards a ship and they, someone points to the other, Finn points to another ship off screen and goes, what about that one? And she goes, that one's garbage. TIE fighter comes in, blows up the ship they're after, and she goes, garbage will do. They run around, and you find out it's the Falcon that's the garbage that they're talking about. And
say what you will about the movie, but that to me,
at that moment, actually, it does.
The John Williams one, and when they're on that, when Rey's flying the Millennium Falcon, just the how they shot that chase scene was such a great reintroduction to the Millennium Falcon. So that's, to me, is my number two. I mean, there's not much more you can say about it. Huh?
In terms of the design, there's an urban myth out there. I'm pretty sure it's just an urban myth that George Lucas got the idea by eating a hamburger that he had taken a bite out of, and so it had and then there was a pickle hanging out of the side of it, and that's where the design of the Millennium Falcon came from. But I'm sure it's not true.
Well, the original design for the Millennium Falcon was if you remember the beginning of episode 1, the consular ship, the red consular ship that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon show up at the Trade Federation ship on. That was the original design for it, but they went through a couple different designs. They didn't like any of them, and then they saw this sort of saucer type ship with these weird fins at the front, and like you said, the offset cockpit, which seems like such an odd design, but at the same time, like it's so different and so iconic that it just kind of stands out. And it's like, we're so used to vehicles to a degree being sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Where it's like even on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Symmetrical. Thank you. Where they're intentionally symmetrical. So like you kind of have the cockpits in ship design sort of centered, but it's like, except we don't drive like that. Like depending on where you are in the world, you're either right side drive or left side drive. So even there, you're offset. So it's like, it's not that weird to have it offset, but in terms of design, it does seem strange. Yeah. But it's so just different that it stands out. And it's like, even you just see the silhouette of that ship and you know exactly what it is.
Yeah. And even the exhaust, like if you just had a shot of the back end of it with the exhaust, you automatically, just that line of blue, you just automatically know what it is. So that's my number 2. I do have an honorable mention we'll talk about later.
Well, let's do our honorable mentions before we go into our number 1.
Okay, so let me do a couple of my honorable mentions. That this one was neck and neck between my number 3 and this one, just because I only picked number 3 because it's more favorable to me. But with our iconic status, you'd have to go with NC-1701, the USS Enterprise from Star Trek.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You have to. I mean.
And to me, the original, well, we're talking about the original, and then there's also the refit, which is probably more famous, more recognizable today, the version they got in the movies, which looks just cooler and updated. And then there's the Enterprise D, which is the next generation.
There was the Enterprise, the refit of the Enterprise, then the Enterprise A, because famously they destroyed the Enterprise.
Yeah. Well, the A is, and then there's B and C, but the A looks just like the refit. But I think the most iconic are the original, the movie version, which was just both the refit and the A that looked identical, and then the D from the next generation. Which I also like the E from the next generation.
I kind of like I love the D. The D. Don't clip that, people. I love the Enterprise
James
D.
James loves the D.
I didn't even go there.
I love I love the design of the Enterprise D. I grew up on Next Generation, but when I saw the Enterprise E the first time, because First Contact is my favorite Star Trek, not just favorite Star Trek movie, it's my favorite Star Trek period.
Yeah.
And that ship is just so gorgeous, so well designed. And it's like everything that was great about the other ones. And now it's a little more warrior type because, of course, we're not in the safe sort of diplomatic world that we used to be, because now we've got the Borg and there's the war with the Dominion over on DS9 and all that. So like they need beefier ships that aren't just there for diplomatic purposes. Yeah. The D and the E just and of course the A, you can't, like, nobody doesn't know what the Enterprise is.
Exactly. You see it and you know it. And another one I want to mention is the same way is the Mystery Machine from Scooby-Doo. Like that to me is such an iconic, in pop culture that you instantly know what it is. Another fun one for me is it's a horror one, but everyone knows it when you see it, especially if you're a horror fan, is Christine, the car Christine from the movies. Another great one. Hey, it's an accessible one, Ryan.
It is an accessible one. Yes.
And the last one for me, that would be an honorable mention. I'm sure I'm missing a lot, and people are going to jump in the comments and let us know what we've missed out on. But for me, another honorable mention is the magic carpet from Aladdin. That to me, that's a pretty great one. I mean, it's one of those, even if you saw it in real life, it's how the design looked, you're like, oh, it's the magic carpet. Like even people today, like they equate Indian based carpets because of, they see one of those and they think of the Aladdin. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but it's the designs of them, how they look instantly, at least for me, it makes me think of it. And that to me is like a compliment just how well they designed it and how much of a character it became within the animated film, that I don't know, to me, it deserved to be at least an honorable mention for sure. Right, Ryan, what about you?
No, let's do James, because I kind of got a shit ton. So I want to see what James.
Well, I mean, we've already mentioned one of mine. One of mine was going to be the Party Wagon because I couldn't decide about, like, I'm already doing 2 of my childhood favorites, and I wanted to do one that was a little more sort of broadly interesting. And to me, there's a little bit less to say about the Party Wagon. To me, I would have lumped in all of the turtle vehicles because, to a degree, they're the same thing. They're just differently designed. They serve the same purpose. It's just one gets destroyed, they build another one. The Bebop from Cowboy Bebop, which these guys don't know as much about, but to me, it's
neither, but I know it. Yeah,
is one of the most iconic ships in all of anime. Which, I mean, there's all kinds of them out there, but like it's just a stunning ship. It's just such a great ship. It's a central part of the show, and like, God, I'm hyped for that movie or that show. I got to mention the Serenity, which is so well designed. The show hasn't aged very well for me, but the design of that ship is just, you get like, again, you see that ship, you know what it's from. We mentioned the Batmobile, and then one thing I was hoping one of you guys would mention, but we haven't, was mechs, which are kind of an important part of like vehicle sort of fiction history and whatnot. So like my two sort of mentions for that, one isn't technically a mech, technically they're their own vehicles, but it's sort of mech design. But the Transformers, of course, like having a Transformer would just be so cool. Like, you know, the design of Optimus Prime, the design of Bumblebee is so cool. And this one is a bit left field, but is sort of supposed to represent a genre, and that's Leopardon.
A Leopardon,
however you want to pronounce it.
I only know it from the audiobook, which we've all read of.
Yeah. So Leopardon was Japanese Spider-Man's mech warrior device.
Oh, okay.
And he was that series inspired the Super Sentai series, which is what became famous on our side of the pond as Power Rangers. Which
you're on the same side of the pond as us. Oh, you mean our side? All our sides of the pond?
Yes.
I thought you were referring to like your side. Never mind. Yeah, you're right. For a second there,
it's dry land between us. What are you talking about, Ryan?
No, that's
There's some Great Lakes, but no,
confused. That's anyway. Go ahead.
This side of the pond, meaning not Japan.
Yes, I understand now.
It became the Power Rangers, and half of what Power Rangers are famous for are their giant mech devices. And Leopardon was the Leopardon, or however you want to pronounce it, is the beginning of that sort of design and whatnot. And because it's Spider-Man related, it holds a special place in my heart. That's one of my favorite parts about the Into the Spider-Verse, the Spider-Verse comic series. Was there's a certain point where like it's just an all-out war with all these Spider-Men fighting the Moreland characters, and just the roof crashes down and this giant mechanical fist punches through, and it's just Leopardon up there fighting, and it's like, I know we're never going to get that in a movie. No. Do you know how much I would fucking lose my mind if that happened in a movie?
Right.
Which I was so disappointed that, you know, we never saw that in Ready Player One. Was like, we have all of these like things out there, and the only mech we get is a what's it called? Well, we get Mechagodzilla, and then we get the Gundam. And it's like, I really wish we had because there was a whole thing in the book about, you know, they all got to choose a mech, and it's like, I really hope there would be a part where there'd be a whole bunch of like giant mechs fighting it out and whatnot. And we get to see some classic ones, some like Power Rangers ones, and some different ones from all kinds of other genres that I'm not familiar with. But then like having Leopardon fight in would just be amazing. But anyway.
So I left out two more before we get to Ryan's honorable mentions that I saw on my list. One of them is the Galactica from Battlestar Galactica. I think is a very, very
that's not accessible.
Not accessible at all.
It's iconic.
It's very iconic as far as sci-fi shows is concerned.
Which one, the original or the remake?
I'd say the remake.
They're largely the same design.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, but I just always loved the look of the TV shows Galactica. And to me, it's one of my. I mean, I have a friend of mine, Rachel and Casey introduced me to the show, and I binged it, and I still think it's one of the best. The ending is to me one of the best and most creative endings to a show ever.
I've never seen past the first season. Opinion. I promised Mr. Sneeden in high school that I would watch the show, and that was 13 years ago, and I've only seen the first season. So
the first two seasons are some of the most brilliant television
I love it. Yeah, I love it. And the last one, I actually, it's a personal one for me, but I think based on its video games and, you know, whether you like the new movie or not, but the light cycle from Tron. Yeah, the Tron cycle. That is so to me, it's one of my favorite arcade games to play. It is accessible. You can make one and like that. To me, that's one along with the Batpod. Like I'd want a light cycle so bad. Like, I would love one to have one and ride around.
And I mean, on that note, like the Akira cycle and like some of the other motorcycles and.
But to me, the light cycle, it's just how it looks, how it was designed, very sleek, very futuristic. But the lights, to me, what you can do blue or red. It's just very creative, very like when you see it, it stands out in its own uniqueness that you could not know what it is. Could not know what it is. I mean,
they made an entire second movie just to put those things out there again.
Exactly.
So,
but that's my own mentions. Ryan, what are some of yours?
Okay, so there's a lot we didn't mention because I was not expecting us to go into spaceships. So good for you. You mentioned Serenity, and KITT is obviously a very iconic one. The skateboard. Another one that we can't talk about today because it's been canceled is the General Lee. from the Dukes of Hazzard. I mean, what is this? What is this? 2005 when they made the movie. Couldn't do that now, obviously, because of the Confederate flag on top. Although if you get an orange 68 Dodge Charger and leave the Confederate flag off, it's still a pretty damn cool car. A couple of ones for me personally that I would make, that I still, part of me wants is, this is the only one we're gonna have from a sitcom, is Eric Foreman's Vista Cruiser.
Oh God, yes.
That shuttles the crew around. I'd like to at least see one of those in real life. And then a black Andalusian horse, which is what Zorro rides in The Mask of Zorro. Now, I'm not ever going to own a horse. That's just not, I don't want to take care of one, but I would love to actually own, or to actually ride a black Andalusian and pretend I'm Zorro, wave a sword around maybe for a little while. As long as we're doing Beasts of Burden, I'm almost surprised that, you know, when you mentioned the anime, James, you didn't mention Appa. Or Falcor,
because I wasn't considering. I mean, if we're going to go that far, I would have gone with I mean, Falcor and Appa for sure. Appa I would have loved, but if we're going to go that far, then I've got to bring up Kurama, who technically to me is more mech than creature at this point. But if no one knows who Kurama is, basically the Nine-Tails Fox from Naruto. The beast that's inside Naruto, the entire series, and they become friends. And
Ryan brought up like the station wagon from that 70s show. Then you got to bring up station wagon from National Lampoon's Vacation.
And I was thinking the Mirthmobile from Wayne's World.
Yeah, the Mirthmobile from Wayne's World. Oh my God, yeah.
So we're opening up a whole can of worms here. Let me get through some of these next ones. Obviously, Ready Player One, the movie, a big portion of that.
That's a whole bag of worms, dude.
That's a whole can of worms. The movie has the famous car chase scene in which everyone has their own vehicles. And in that we see, you mentioned the bike from Akira. Artemis rides the bike from Akira. Wade drives the DeLorean. You also see Christine, which Josh mentioned. The A-Team van is in there, and so is the National Lampoon station wagon. So I forget what else is in there. We can include a little clip.
The Bigfoot, which if you were a kid in the 80s, the Bigfoot was such an iconic monster truck at the time.
Yeah.
And then some other really iconic cars would be, now Josh informed us a few shows ago that he has never seen an episode of Supernatural, which is interesting because it's been on the air on the CW for 15 years.
Past the first 5 seasons, watch a few of the comedy episodes and you're good.
Yeah. But the 1967 Chevy Impala, which they drive around, which
one of my favorite memes online is whenever you'll see like a convention of cars, and then you'll see like the Mystery Machine, the Impala, and the Ectomobile. It's like, oh shit, something's going down in town.
And then lastly, second to last is the Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger, which is actually, this is a fun historical fact. The actual car, which did include ejector seats and machine guns that never actually fired real bullets, but everything in that car was real. And the car itself was stolen and remains lost to this day. So when you think about the great lost items through our history, you have Venus de Milo's arms, you have the Ark of the Covenant, you have, and I included the Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger in there. And lastly is the absolute most accessible one we've talked about, because I've actually seen several of these driving around Des Moines, Iowa, and that is the Jurassic Park.
The
Jeep or the Explorer? Because I've seen both in plenty.
I would say the Jeep is more iconic.
Really? I'd say just because of the T-Rex scene, the Explorer would be way more iconic. Because we spent like a good 20 minutes with that.
I wasn't thinking there was more than one. The Jeep being the open.
I would say the Jeep is because like that's the scene where you see the Brachiosaurus.
Yeah, I guess there's one that's open and there's one that's closed. I guess I was just thinking
the Ford Explorer one is the one where the kids get attacked by the T-Rex.
Yeah.
But for me, like I
think I've seen both, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So.
I've seen both plenty.
Yeah. So, all right, James. All right, that's all right, Ryan. What is your number one?
So, like we said, we all know each other's number one. Man, the thing that kicked off this entire thing to begin with is the fact that I messaged you guys and I was like, oh my God, I found it. And that was, I found a 1991 Harley Davidson Fat Boy in Denver, Colorado, which at this point I'm working a shit job. I might have a teaching job here in the next week. So, cross your fingers. But even then I wouldn't be able to afford this for years. I mean, it's only $7,000. If anyone's watching this, do not look this up and buy this shit from under me, because I will find you. But It's so in the 1991 masterpiece, one of the second greatest motion picture of all time after The Godfather, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, drives a 1991 Harley Davidson Fat Boy, which he steals from a fella at a biker bar. And the version that I found has a windshield and it's red. So I would have to take the windshield off and I would have to paint it black, have a paint job done on it. It's to me, it's that whole movie is just the epitome of cool. And Arnold in that movie is the epitome of cool. He's the ultimate action hero. He's on American Film Institute's top 50 heroes of all cinema list. And the original Terminator is on the top 50 villains list.
I'll say, yeah, because
yeah, he's on both.
As roughly the same character.
Yeah. Right. Just obviously the scene where he's chasing the truck and he's flipping the gun, and which also I have ordered for $18 a replica of the sunglasses he wears, which are, you can get replicas or ones that claim to be not authentic, but close enough to the original. There's different ones you can find, so I got the cheapest one I could find. The jacket's impossible to find, so you can only find ones that claim to be a replica of the jacket. And I'm looking at, I'm like, no, that's different. So I think I could probably get that custom made sometime. Just go to a leather shop and be like, after you get done with my bondage suit, can you make this this for me?
What show am I on?
So there's the suit, there's the sunglasses, and then of course there is the gun. And that is as James helped me find out, that is an 1887 Winchester lever action 12 gauge, which again are kind of difficult to find. Obviously I want to ride the whole bike around Des Moines and flip the gun and get arrested.
I was going to say, be careful with the gun. You probably be better to do with a replica, which wouldn't be hard to make.
No.
But you've got to make it clear that it's a replica. Unfortunately, because of certain, I know certain states have open carry laws, and we've already gone through this. Just be careful with it, okay?
Right.
The interesting thing also is I thought about this for the first time. I was like, whatever became of the bike in the movie? And I was thinking about this, is like they leave it at the hospital. Because he has the famous big action scene, and then they go to the hospital to rescue Sarah. They get in the hospital, and then they escape and they steal a car. So the bike by the end of the movie is still in the basement, is the parking lot in the parking garage of the hospital. So never to be seen again. Maybe the guy got it back. He filed a missing bike report and got his bike back. So
something tells me if he's a traditional biker, he's not filing a police report. But that's me making assumptions about his character.
All right, James, I think we know what your number one is, but just in case we don't, well, what is it? I mean,
so I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. Anyone who knows me, again, we've already alluded to it, but it's the greatest car in film history, the Ecto motherfucking 1. This car to me is my sort of golden goose. It's the most beautiful. We talk about the DeLorean, how beautiful it is, in my opinion, at least, how iconic it is as a vehicle, and how it has one of the best sort of introductions in film history. This car is the most beautiful, is the most iconic, in my opinion, and has the best introduction of a movie vehicle in history. You see those giant black doors slowly open, the steam and smoke pouring out. You see the black open on that license plate. You see Ecto 1. You see the lights flash up with all the smoke behind it, and it's just billowing out, and it just speeds around that corner, that overcranked film, because that beast could not drive fast to save its life. This magnificent piece of machinery it's the thing I've obsessed about in terms of cars my entire life.
You get a license for this car.
The car when I was a kid, I drove that toy car to its death and back again. It was everything.
Wait, there was a toy car that you could drive of the Ecto 1?
Not drive. It was a plastic car that you put the figures in and you drove around, but that went everywhere, everywhere with me. It went to the bathroom. It went to my, I slept with, it was in bed with me. I took it to daycare kind of thing. It went everywhere. This vehicle is based on a 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor ambulance. Miller Meteor was a company out of Ohio that did ambulance, hearse, and limo modifications to Cadillac vehicles, which actually wasn't uncommon at the time. A lot of hearses and ambulances were modified stock cars. And the Cadillac, of course, being one of the most iconic visual grills, and the fins on it, just visually, it's like just a stunning look of a car. And they made like ambulances out of this thing. One of the things you got to know about the movie and this car is that Dan Aykroyd is a big motorhead. It's part of the reason why so much of Blues Brothers is about cars and is about blowing up cars and destroying cars. And one of his great passions is emergency vehicles. He loves cop cars. He loves ambulances. He loves cop bikes. When I was growing up in Kingston, just outside of Kingston, Ontario, Canada, Dan Aykroyd has a cottage up there, and he routinely takes bikers, like a huge gang of like 100 motorcycle enthusiasts, and just drives around all the northern towns up there. He had a like amphibious car. Like he drove past my house many times. He had an amphibious car that every Canada Day he would take kids out at the point on Sydenham Lake and just give kids rides in it. And I stupidly didn't go and do it. I don't know why to this day I didn't go and do that. Like I could have met one of my heroes and I just didn't do it. I don't know why. So like he has a huge passion for these vehicles, and that's why the Ecto-1 is based on an ambulance. Now, the specific type of vehicle, it's called a Futura Deluxe, which is slightly different from most of the other. It's the most common of the Miller Meteor versions of the Cadillac, and it's the one that's most often made into an ambulance. Some had a slightly higher roof. It's kind of hard to tell on the model, but the back roof here would be elevated a little bit to give more clearance for passengers and whatnot. There was also a version where the back end here would be sort of closed off. Like if you've seen a sort of modern or sort of a classic hearse, you know, that like the back area is sort of like dark and it's got a panel and it'll have like a little squiggly thing along there. And that was actually the design they wanted for the ambulance in the first place. But getting these cars is hard. Even then it was kind of hard. And they had two versions in the movie, the black car and the white car, and they ended up turning the black car into a second white car in the second film. It was actually a car that they borrowed for the film because they just wanted a pre-version because they'd already built the Ecto and had already gone out shooting with it already. And much like the DeLorean, this vehicle is kind of notorious on the production of the film for being sort of like a busted ass jalopy where it broke down all the time. And there's shots where like they literally had PAs pushing the vehicle with the brake off and just like speeding up the film so that it would like drive by the camera enough that it looked like it was moving so they could get a moving shot. So part of what I'm excited about for the next film is that they've actually gone back and rebuilt the car kind of from scratch. I know it looks junkier, but like they've got a brand new transmission in there. They've got a Corvette engine in there. This thing is like built to be like far superior to anything they did before. And you can see that in the shots that they have in the trailer of it, like just zip around streets. The original car couldn't do any of that. Like I said, when it comes out of the garage in the first film, it's overcranked film. Like they've sped it up so that it's moving faster than it possibly could, because it was notorious for breaking down.
One thing I'm excited about for the new Ecto-1 for the new movie, which I don't know if it was in the cartoons or not. I know it wasn't in the movies, but you see a clip in the trailer where it looks like a chair is like extended out.
Yeah.
The gunner seat.
Yeah. Was that in the cartoons at all? I don't remember seeing it.
The toy had a roof gunner seat. They never had, as far as I remember, they never had a gunner seat in the actual vehicle. What they did have was they had two other sort of Ectomobiles that they could put into the back of the Ecto-1. And that was the Ecto-2, which was the sort of helicopter type thing. And they also had a one-wheel scooter thing that was hidden in the wheel well that they could pull out and ride, which I think that lasted all of 2 episodes. But the Ecto-2 is like iconic if you know the cartoon at all. Like every kid had the Ecto-2 when I was a kid.
Right.
And it's almost itself. Like I really wish they would do a live action version of that at some point. They're not going to, but like just so much about this car I just love so much. I love that like it is just such a beautiful vehicle. Like this model, I love this vehicle so much. This model is just full of dust because it's been sitting on my shelf for so long as part of my collection. Like just look at that front grille. Like that is so iconic. That is so beautiful. The lines on this vehicle are just stunning and just gorgeous.
Make a
remember,
noise, James.
I will say it's pretty funny. I will say it was funny when you said, the first appearance of Ecto-1. I was like, yeah, I guess technically the first appearance of Ecto-1 is when they open up the doors, but the first appearance of the vehicle is like they're sitting there looking outside, like Bill Murray's like looking outside, and all of a sudden
the black hearse rolls up, and they Ray does the rundown of everything that's wrong with it, and it's only going to cost $4,000 to fix.
Oh no!
Brakes, brake pads, shocks, shock mounts.
So it's kind of like wiring. We mentioned Grease Lightning.
Yeah,
but like
Grease Lightning from.
Or this car could be systematic. Why, it could be hydromatic.
Anyway, but when you see the Ecto-1 for the first time, the fully painted out, the one with the symbols on it, the lights and everything, all of the gear on top, which you want to talk about thought put into a vehicle, thought put into like a movie vehicle. Every device on that vehicle has a purpose.
Yeah.
I bought the owner's manual like a year ago, 2 years ago. I've gone through this thing a couple times, and it outlines like what every single thing does in there. I learned new things about this week for it. Like what you don't know, and they've had to actually remove because of the new movie, is when the gunner seat opens up on this side. It used to be that in order to fit the proton packs on a gurney in the back here, they had the left side sort of empty and then had some gear on that side, and then on the right side they had the two former passenger seats facing each other. So if you actually watch Ghostbusters 2, you can see a moment wherein they're doing the montage sequence and Bill Murray's looking behind him like, what the hell's going on, when they're taking a wild corner. You can see that he's actually not facing the front of the vehicle. His back is to the front windshield. You can see the back of Ray and Egon's heads, and he's looking like, what is going on? Because unfortunately, that was a deleted scene where Ray had been possessed by Vigo and was trying to kill them in the car and driving wild, and they didn't leave the rest of that in there. But there's Bill Murray's shot in there, and it always perplexed me, like, how the hell does the layout of this vehicle work? Because they've actually got, like, right beside them there, a computer. It used to be like a very like switch box kind of computer thing, but now, like in the 89 version, they included a little like desktop computer, and like now it's taken out completely because the thing's broken and whatnot. And you can actually see the character podcast, a little Asian kid sitting on like old components in there that have just been rusted and dusty and all that stuff. But like I could go on for days telling you like every little aspect of this vehicle, just how gorgeous it is. Like the fins on that thing. Look at the fins. What other car had like look at the design of the Cadillac is such a beautiful vehicle, and just putting like an iconic sort of like action vehicle in a hearse, in an ambulance. Like that's one of my favorite things about the irony of the way they designed this thing, is that they're supposed to be busting ghosts and saving lives, but they're using a hearse / ambulance to do it, and it's like
and
the symbology of that is kind of messed up, and it's intentionally humorous. But
what I'm about to say is a good segue to my number one. But overall, I think when we look back at some of our lists and what's iconic and what's other than maybe the motorcycle, because all motorcycles sound the same, but to me, what helps these vehicles so iconic is the sounds they make. Like when you like for Ecto-1, if you didn't see it, if you just heard the sirens, you instantly know that's Ecto-1. And you heard the Millennium Falcon. If you heard the sounds of Millennium Falcon fly by in your ears, you'll know it's the Millennium Falcon because it has a unique sound to it.
The TIE Fighters, more than anything, have the sound.
TIE Fighters too, yeah, especially the TIE Fighters. If you heard that, you're like, oh, that's TIE Fighters for sure.
There's a great TikTok of a beagle dog in like vet clinic, and it's like screaming at the top of its lungs, but every time it would scream, they would cut to a TIE fighter flying, and it's just so like well timed and hilarious. It's just perfect and spot on. But in terms of like, you're right, the iconic ambulance, like the siren, they sought to find like a specific sound for this because they didn't want it to sound like any other siren that existed. And what they actually did, I learned today for the first time, they took a leopard scream, flipped it backwards, pitched it, and like put it through a synthesizer, and that's like, and then they would pitch it up and down to get the like just going up and down. Like, oh, I love the way sound design works, how they build those things out of like organic sounds and then make it into something different.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in going in with the most iconic sounds and what you hear, and for me, this is why my number one is one of the most iconic in TV and movie history.
Can't think of what this is going to be.
I don't know. Even if you're not a fan of this show and you don't even know what it is, hang on. My my camera just died. Hold on, let me switch it over. Camera just died. Give me just a second. There we go. I'm back. No, camera just died. That's okay. It happens. But to me, it's the most iconic. I have it right here as a matching tattoo. I don't know if you can see it, but I also have, it is the Doctor Who TARDIS, which if you remember a nerd out, TARDIS stands for time and relative dimensions in space. So, and funny enough, my wife is the one who got me onto Doctor Who. She was the fan well before I was, and then I watched the show and just instantly fell in love with it. And I started off with watching the Ninth Doctor, the new revamped shows, and watched on from there. But then I was able to try and find. At first it was very hard to find back then when I first started watching it in 2012, the original Doctor Who, like the original shows, like from the 70s, from the 60s. Sorry, I had. 63. Which the first appearance of the TARDIS was from November the first Doctor in 1963. November 1963. That's correct.
Which you know why that date's important.
Yeah. It debuted the day after Kennedy was killed.
Yeah.
They had to re-air it because even in England, the news surrounding the Kennedy assassination was just overpowering. So they had to re-air the pilot episode. I mean,
but and some of even the phrases for it, because when you step inside the TARDIS, it's bigger on the inside that everyone says, or Clara, who was the very unique one, it's smaller on the outside, which was something that the Doctor never heard, which I thought was very clever of her character. But to me, is what I love the most is that the outside has always been relatively the same. Maybe they'll have lighter blue or darker blue, but throughout it's stood the test of time from the 60s to now, that the outside is almost pretty much the same. When you see the blue box, you know exactly what it is. Even if you're not a fan of Doctor Who, you go, that is, like, I've even had fans go, even had people come to me, is that the TARDIS from what's that show from? Oh yeah, I say Doctor Who, and like, yeah, because they just know what the TARDIS is.
Yeah, but it's accessible, Josh. You can get one. I've been inside one.
Oh yeah, at our wedding, we had a Doctor Who themed wedding, and he had a life-size TARDIS that we got introduced as at our reception. I thought was really awesome. But other things,
yeah, and you were dressed as the 10th Doctor too.
Yeah, I was.
David
Tennant, 10th Doctor, my favorite Doctor of them all.
Mine too.
Yep. I mean, I feel like Matt Smith had the best adventures, but the best character was...
He had the best theme song.
Yeah. But
not like the opening theme, like character theme.
And I think what helped the TARDIS stand the test of time, and also just the fun adventures that they go on throughout time. But also what's also is really cool is that they always revamp the inside to fit the Doctor's personality. Like whenever he became a new version of himself, that the inside always changed to fit what he was, his current personality was.
A little more so in the modern stuff. The original,
the old stuff was
it changed, but it was like minor stuff. Like it still had the big white round jewels right up until I want to say like the 5th or 6th Doctor. But
I think so.
Like they had that for a long time, and then of course with oh my god, the 9th Doctor.
Eccleston.
When Eccleston came in, they changed the interior, and it was like coral design. And then with David Tennant, it was largely the same, but like had some slight differences. And then with each iteration, they changed it. But the funny thing with the fact that like the interior changes and the exterior, which has remained so iconic, doesn't change, is that it's supposed to change. Yeah. In universe, the TARDIS has a chameleon circuit, which it's supposed to blend into its environment. It's not supposed to stand out and be noticeable. And the recurring joke is that the damn thing is just broken and he doesn't care to fix it. In fact, if you watch the first 2 episodes, when like you see you're introduced to the TARDIS and the Doctor by 2 of the main cast walking into the junkyard and seeing all this stuff, and they just see this police box sitting there, which police box has a whole thing in England, which doesn't mean much here, but it's an actual box, a phone box that would be set on corners in all kinds of towns, and you could put criminals in there. You can call for backup. There was gear hidden in there, or you could call the police from there. But the TARDIS was supposed to blend in, and like you see this thing, and it's like weird that it's in a junkyard, and then like they land on an alien planet for the first time, and the Doctor exits it, and he's like, it didn't change, and he's kind of perplexed by this, and it just never evolved for like it just stayed the same, and it's like. To me, that's like one of the best recurring jokes about the show is that the TARDIS has just remained this big blue box.
Yeah.
The other thing is that in England, it does like they don't even know what a police box is anymore. So the TARDIS has become just the TARDIS because there's no police boxes anymore. And in the show, in the newer iterations, the show that's been on since 2005, they've had every now and then someone asks, what the hell is that? And they go, oh, well, and then they dive into an explanation of what a police box used to be. Back in the day, they used to do this. And then they would, because obviously we don't even have phone booths anymore, which is kind of sad because London is so well known for its red telephone booths, and now they're obsolete. But
But to me, not only just the sounds that it makes when it takes off, but just like its look, the sense of adventure you get anytime you see it. Like it's one of those objects that stand the test of time as far as in pop culture. Now, for nerds like me, I mean, I can go on and on and on about it. I don't want to, take up too much time on it, but it's very special to me because it's the show that really me and my wife connected on, that she introduced me to. And even then, like I've loved the show ever since. I've loved just the actual, I love that this thing is so well feared. But when you think about it, it's just a police box. But when people like in that show, in that world, when they see it, it's like a warship. Technically, it's a warship. Technically, it can be. It's apparently one of the most dangerous ships, ever. And even like the real actual size of it, it's supposed to be like this huge ass ship. But it's, like I said, it's broken, so it decides just to stay as the police box.
There's a couple episodes that are of interest. One episode in which they actually start to explore outside the main room of the TARDIS, and they're realizing how big the TARDIS really is. And by the end of it, they're like, just how big is this thing? And they leave it kind of blank, that you still don't know just how this thing could be the size of a planet or something even bigger.
The movie also explores like different rooms in the ship too, and like he's got a den, and like you see the cloister bell and like this giant like well eye thing. I don't remember what it's for, but
he's got to sleep somewhere too. We never see his bedroom, but
does he? Have we ever seen him sleep?
We've never seen the bedroom.
We know that Amy and Rory conceived River in the TARDIS.
Yep. And not only that, but it's funny when you see like Amy and Rory, they'll come into there's an episode where they come into the frame. He's like, oh, how was the pool? And like, oh, the pool is fantastic. Like, there's a fucking pool in there. Like, what?
Yeah. And then the other episode that's of interest is the one where you find out the TARDIS actually has a personality. And it's an episode written by Neil Gaiman, which is where you see the TARDIS as a woman, in which you kind of it almost has a sexual romantic relationship with the TARDIS in that episode.
I mean, that's been implied for decades that there's like this weird sort of pseudo-romantic sexual relationship between the Doctor and the TARDIS, and everyone's like kind of like,
do you want to be
alone?
We're
not going to acknowledge this, and we're just going to kind of back away and let you do whatever you're doing with the console, Doc, because we don't really know what the Sonic Screwdriver does. But like, and I was just actually thinking about it in terms of the vehicles that we've mentioned. I think the TARDIS predates everything else.
Oh yeah, it does,
because it's before the Enterprise, it's before the Batmobile, it's before, like, I can't think of anything that came before it in terms of like famous vehicle iconography, besides something like you did mention Zorro's horse, but that's like in terms of vehicles, like I don't think that's necessarily
I'm also only really thinking of the Mask of Zorro version of the horse, which is the only reason I know it's a black Andalusian. So
but like it's kind of the predecessor to like everything
sci-fi.
It is
like it predates the live action Batmobile, so it doesn't predate the comic.
No, but that's what I mean. But that's what we're talking about is film and television iconic vehicles. So in terms of like film and television Batmobiles, it's before the George Barris version, it's before the Tim Burton version. It's like, but like that's part of what I'm trying to get at is that like it is sort of like the seed and inspiration for a lot of, like, obviously Bill and Ted kind of borrowed from it by using a telephone booth for their time machine, and just even some of the iconography of like how that thing works. It isn't quite the same. Like they had to like change it so it kind of like shrinks to the ground kind of thing and disappears. Whereas like the TARDIS just kind of like, because they were limited in their effects, they just could kind of fade. But this, like, you're right, the sound of that vehicle, you hear that and it's like
when it arrives or when it leaves, both sounds are so iconic. It's so iconic and so memorable.
They would finish an episode with that, or like you would hear that off in the background of an episode and you're like, oh, something's about to happen.
You get excited
about it, and it's like it's as cool as hearing the theme song, which again has gone like there's different iterations, but it's remained basically the same thing for 60 some odd years. There was like a 10 or 15 to 20 year gap.
That would have been a great moment.
No, there was it was like a 10-year gap.
It was more than that. I think the movie came out in the early
96. It was 96. The movie was 96 or 97.
I think it was 96. So yeah, 9 years in between the time that there
And
was
when did
no
McCoy's end run? It was like run end. It was like 87, I think.
Something like that. But that would have been a great moment in Ready Player One if they'd been in the battle and all of a sudden you hear vroom, vroom,
right.
Vroom. It was already a great moment when Serenity showed up. That was, I think we were in the theater together. I think it was like, ah.
Well, it's such a bummer that like that movie just, one of the things I regret about that is that they couldn't get rights to certain things. Yeah. And like obviously like I'm bummed that the Batmobile couldn't be in there and they couldn't get more sort of like iconic mechs in there and whatnot. But like certain vehicles that, you know, just would have been so great to see on screen, or certain, you know, like again, like someone riding through the battle on a hoverboard would have been just so damn cool. Right. Or busting out a lightsaber, and it's like little moments like we can lament the movie as much as we want, but like I those were some misses for me that I thought were actually not detrimental, but a little bit of a bummer. But yeah, going back to the TARDIS, it's hard to beat it in terms of iconography. It's hard to beat it in terms of like cultural impact, in terms of like, when I say iconography, like you see that vehicle, you see a silhouette of that thing, you know what it is.
Yep.
There's no mistaking it. You see a lot of spaceships and it's like, I can maybe guess at like 50% of them if you give me like a list of like the 100, you know, most famous spaceships, and it's like, I couldn't tell you what the ship from 2001 looks like versus the ships from like Blade Runner, like the ships from this or the ships from that, or like I can kind of guess what the Galactic looks like, and yes, I can tell what the Enterprise looks like, but like the TARDIS, you know what it is. You see the Enterprise, you know what it is. You see the Millennium Falcon, you know what it is. You see the DeLorean, you see the Ecto-1. Like these are vehicles that you know what they are without ever having to even like it. Going back to like,
mine is still just a General motorcycle. That's still my number one.
True.
Yeah, but you see a motorcycle like that, and my immediate thought is that the T2 Mike or bike, or like
no, you see a million motorcycles and think that it might.
No, I think what attaches the motorcycle to that one is if you have a leather jacket and glasses, you're like, oh, that's from T2. Like you have to have the more kind of a combination with the motorcycle.
Wearing your sunglasses in the daylight,
exactly,
and carrying an 1887 Winchester,
and being chased by a giant flat nose truck through the the rivers of Los Angeles.
Aqueducts. Yep. You think I'm not going to like navigate those one day? Like, oh my god, that'd be the best moment.
Yeah, good luck with that. I don't think people are allowed in there.
Yeah, I don't.
If I can actually ride the fucking motorcycle through those things, like I will pay $1 million.
Ryan, I'll tell you what. If you can get the motorcycle for that, and you can get me the truck, I will chase you through the aqueducts. Okay.
And then
I will do my best to run you over. I will give you the most authentic experience possible, except for the blowing up. I'm not made of metal.
See, it's funny because if we can all get our dream vehicles, I'll have the motorcycle, you'll have the Ecto-1, and Josh should just be sitting in a TARDIS.
No, what I would do, my dream when we buy our home is to have a wide enough hallway to our bedroom to where the front of the TARDIS would be like our doorway into our bedroom.
Oh my God. I've seen dens done like that.
Yeah, just like that would be the dream for me. You know, I'd love that.
And the problem with both of my vehicles, the Ecto-1 and the DeLorean, is that, I mean, the DeLorean we can buy now, but like for the longest time, you couldn't. There was only 9,000 of them out there. Pretty much all of them are gone. The Ecto-1, they actually have a problem right now where like actual enthusiasts of vehicles hate the Ghostbusters community because we bought up every fucking version of the 59 Cadillac. In every iteration, we've modified it in every way possible to make it look like this. We bought the 58 version out. We've bought the 61 version out. In fact, when they had to go and make the new vehicle for the new movie to do the interiors, they actually bought a 61 version to cannibalize and cut up to do the interiors because you can't find the 59 version anymore. Like that's how enthusiastic this community is about this vehicle. That's how much it means to my community. Is like it's a character in the movie, and it's just it's like such a. I could go on for days. Sorry.
Oh yeah, we all can go on for days.
We'll get the bike for me. If we get really rich, we'll even make a Millennium Falcon, maybe even a mechanical Falcor or Appa to just go. Or Toothless.
Right,
Toothless would be cool.
That'd be cool. But that'll do it for today's, folks. I think we had a really great list. If we left out anything, jump in the comments. Let us know of what one of those you might have missed out on. Also, give us your top 3 best and most iconic, your favorite vehicles of all time. It could be, like we've said, it could be the hoverboard. It could be a motorcycle. It could be really anything that's a vehicle from a
van.
TV show, anything. Jump in the comments and let us know your thoughts. Ooh, Silver Surfer surfboard's a good one. That's a real good
Fantastic
one.
car.
The spider buggy.
Oh my God. Also, guys, if you like what you watch, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you receive more of our various content in the future. We have so many great segments here on ReelTime. We have a new
Enterprise shuttle.
Oh my God. We have the new segment, which I am bringing back and being hopefully in conjunction with the school I am a part of. We will see. We also have Ryan hopefully coming up with some new conversations with some of the great filmmakers of our time. And also we have our movie reviews, our trailer reactions, everything. There's some great segments we supply you guys here. So please subscribe and follow us along on this fun journey that we have talking about movies. Now, lastly, before we sign off here, this is actually going to be a breaking news for these guys in our next segment, which I am very excited for. Probably next week sometime we'll bring it out to you guys. But we're going to be giving you guys our top 3 most iconic and favorite movie props, or props, I should say, from any TV show or movie franchise of our likings. I think that would be a fun one too.
It's the gun and the glasses.
Hey, well, we will make a fun segment out of that one, talking about some of the most iconic props that you will see in any TV show or movie. So tune in next time and follow us along. But that'll do this for today. Again, I'm Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy.
And I'm James Sheridan.
And thank you for keeping it real
with ReelTime.
Good night.
Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors. It's the only way to live.